humour does help people to connect. It creates a better vibe in the place. When you laugh, you're feeling better. If you can get your colleagues laughing, they're feeling better as well. It's not a comedy show we're talking about here. It's humour for a purpose. I really do believe in the power of complimenting people and finding reasons to make people feel good. Because if I set myself a goal, I want to compliment someone today. When I compliment you, David, I know I've achieved my goal. The dopamine kicks in for me because I've achieved a goal, but it's obviously going to make you feel better as well. And I often get questions from people like, how do I find ways to compliment people? And what I actually say in my presentation is, look, you can always find some reason to compliment someone. You can come up with something like, wow, your hair doesn't look as bad today as it did yesterday. I mean, all right, something like that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I watched it this morning. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. But I mean, I actually do use that line, but that's kind of an example when we're talking about the importance of compliment, but I'm bringing the humour in as well.
If you've spent any time working in a heavily corporate environment, then you've probably had it ingrained into you that leaders are to be taken seriously and that the workplace is no place for silliness or joking around or humour. Well, in today's episode, we're going to be challenging that myth of leadership of work, really. Just because work is serious, just because business is serious, doesn't mean that we as humans within that environment cannot have a bit of humour. So my guest today is Conor Cunneen. He's also known as the Irishman who speaks, or the Irishmanspeaks, which is his brand. He's a speaker, obviously. He also trains people, teaches people how to inject humour into their presentations in the right way, in a meaningful way, and in a relevant way. And perhaps the core principle behind that, which we'll be hearing all about in a moment, is that it's not about comedy. It's not about getting the laugh for the laugh's sake. It's about humour that reinforces your message and, as a leader, helps you build those all-important human connections with the people you work with. So we're going to be talking about all of this and more. We'll be hearing about Conor's speaking career, about his career before that as VP of Marketing at Unilever, and all of the lessons that he's learned about that. We'll, of course, be talking about leadership and how you can deploy humour in the right way, in a way that's effective and not detrimental to your leadership. And we'll also cover some important topics like the power of compliments and intentionality. So loads of things to cover. We will be going off on some great tangents, and I know, listener, that you will find this an entertaining one, a humorous one perhaps, but also very educational and relevant to any leader in any position. So stick around. I will get Conor on the show any second after the music.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Conor, welcome to Leading with Integrity. It's great to have you on the show. Looking forward to getting to a bit of a conversation about humour and its role in leadership today. I'm sure we'll go off on all sorts of lovely tangents as well. So yeah, welcome.
Thanks, David. Greetings from Chicago, where it's really humid at the moment.
Is it snowing? I've heard it's always snowing in Chicago.
No, but I tell you what, I tell people, David, I've been working on my Chicago accent for 26 years now. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
So nearly nailed it. But I do remember when we came in 26 years ago, it was only about 5 days before Christmas. We decided to come in before Christmas rather than after. And about 7 days after we came in, Chicago had its worst snowstorm in 30 years. Now, for a guy coming from Ireland or England as well, it would be the same. I mean, where an inch of snow is kind of a big deal. We had 28, 30 inches of snow. And if my marriage survived that kind of an experience, it'll survive anything. So that was my baptism of fire in a cold, snowy Chicago 26 years ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's good to know, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, I mean, that was one of those lovely tangents that I mentioned, wasn't it, at the beginning?
Yep.
So, I mean, a good place to start, I find, is really to kind of give you the reins for a little bit, to tell the listeners a bit about yourself, your background, your career so far, what you do today, and why you do it. So, yeah, over to you, really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for the opportunity. Well, it's Conor Cunneen. The brand is Irishmanspeaks, and I'm sure you're wondering where that ever came from. But basically what I do, David, is I'm a keynote speaker and a business facilitator. And my mission is to improve people, performance and productivity with a smile. And I would hazard a guess that virtually every organization wants to improve their people, their performance and their productivity. And if I can do that with a smile and put a smile on their face as well, I think it's a win-win for every organization. So basically what I speak to is manufacturing, to financial, to healthcare groups who want to improve their people, their performance and their productivity. And I've been doing now for the last 17, 18 years. Came over originally, I was working with a corporate, you'd know the company Unilever. And I was VP of marketing for their food service business, Hellman's Mayonnaise, Knorr Soups and Sauces, Ben and Jerry's were some of the main brands that we had, etc. So that's what brought me over here to the States. And after I left the Unilever, I took a little bit of time trying to figure out where I wanted to go. Didn't want to go back into corporate. And I did some work on consulting initially, but was being asked to speak at events, was being asked to come back and speak again at the event next year. And I realized, hey, I've got messaging that does make sense to people. I think I tell good stories. I've got some good humor in the presentations. And I think I do enough work with my clients to be able to empathize with them and their audience so that I can connect properly with them. So that basically is how Conor Cunneen, Irishmanspeaks, is now based in Chicago, attempting to improve people, performance and productivity with a smile.
Lovely. Yeah, I love that. One of the things I'm thinking back to a blog article from like 3 years ago now, but it's always fascinated me like how you can, particularly that productivity word, but also productivity not at the cost of people's souls and their sense of humor, their enjoyment of their job. And that feels like a real trick of management. I like alliteration as well. So the title on that particular article I'm thinking of was People, Purpose and Pranks.
Yeah, right.
Pranks, obviously you have to caveat that quite heavily because it can get out of hand pretty quickly, but
that's true. I mean, that's the challenge. You've got to make sure that, for instance, in my business, I do bring humor, and we can illustrate some of that later on to the presentation. But it is relevant, and it reinforces the messages that I have got. I mean, I do remember back in corporate, like some of the pranks that we got up to, and they're probably funny at the time, but maybe the people you play the pranks on didn't really appreciate it. And whatever you want to do, I mean, if you do pranks, you need to be able to make sure that it's to the benefit of everyone, not to laugh at someone, because when you're starting to laugh at someone, you lose them. You're not going to get the collaboration and the real camaraderie that you feel you're trying to get to.
100%. I think, yeah, they work best when the target is just general silliness as opposed to a specific individual.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you can't, you get into like bullying territory really easily, and it's just not worth it. It's no good for anyone when that sort of thing happens, but just like the sort of silly stuff you do in the office, like office cricket was a thing that we used to have where you random cardboard tubes and whatever looked like a ball, and who could hit it furthest along the office, silly stuff like that where no one really gets hurt. Apart from the clumsy director who always manages to hurt himself, shall remain nameless, but he knows.
Indeed, yes, yeah.
You do quite a bit of teaching, and you have a few courses as well. And one of those, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is about being able to consistently capture and then create that humor whilst also keeping it relevant. So what are some of the key techniques that you teach to enable people to do that in the right way in the workplace?
Well, I do a course on adding humor to your presentation, and it's actually an online course, and I do it in person as well. And basically the bottom line, David, is that when people are laughing, they're feeling better. So my feeling is that if during your presentations or during that sales pitch, if you can get your audience or if you can get your clients to smile once or twice during the presentation, that's going to get the neurochemicals in the brain kind of moving. You're going to feel better. You're going to connect better with the people who've made you smile. So there's a win-win in it. And what I talk about is, I'm not talking about doing comedy at your business presentation. I'm talking about adding humor to the business presentation that reinforces your message. And what I basically say, David, is that you don't need to be funny to be funny. And by that, I mean, all you have to do, but you need to do it in a disciplined way, is capture the humor that you see around you. And almost certainly in the last few days when you were doing podcasts or you were interacting with other people, you said something that put a smile on their face. Quite likely, you don't recall what that was. But what I'm saying to you and to others is that when you say something that puts a smile on someone's face in the future, just capture it, write it down, put it into your iPhone notes or Android or whatever it is. And the idea is you don't know when you're going to use it, but what you do have is now you've got a little bit of humor that I may be able to use sometime, someplace, somewhere. I'll just give you one little example on this. I speak a lot to improve people performance and productivity with a smile, as I said. One of my major client groups is manufacturing, and I've done a number of safety conferences as well. So let's assume that I'm speaking to you as a safety audience. And I use the definition of safety. It's not my one, but I heard it sometimes somewhere that, all right, your objective as a safety group is you want your people to come into work with 10 fingers and toes and leave with 10 fingers and toes. And to do that, you've got to be aware of your surroundings. A few weeks ago, I went to collect my darling granddaughter from soccer practice. We were taking her for overnight. So my wife and I collected Maggie, our little 6-year-old redheaded granddaughter, and we put her into the back seat of the car. My wife sat in at the back seat of the car, and we said goodbye to our daughter. And then I sat into the back seat of the car as well. So after a couple of seconds, Maggie realized, Grampy, as she calls me, you should be driving the car. And I said, Maggie, I'll stay here. And she said, Grampy, as only a 6-year-old granddaughter could do. I said, okay, I'll drive the car. I get out of the back seat of the car. We're on child lock or Grampy lock as well. All right. So what I have to do is I've got to phone my daughter, who's got to come back about 5 minutes that she's gone away at that stage. She's got to come back into the parking lot, open the back door for me, let me out, etc., so I could drive the car. Now, what has that got to do with safety and as you as a manufacturing or safety audience? The bottom line, gang, is that you need to be aware of your surroundings. And if you're not aware of your surroundings in a dangerous environment, you're going to get into trouble. So the question for you as a safety or manufacturing audience is, what are the child locks that you're not paying attention to in your environment? And I'll reinforce this one other simple way. Some of you here in the audience have got kids. You probably are putting them into the back seat of the car this morning, drove them over to kindergarten or play school. When you're doing that tomorrow, just remember, wow, the child locks. What are the child locks that could cause me trouble in the workplace? Or some of you may not have kids, but you'll be at the traffic lights tomorrow and you'll see a family beside you with the kids in the back seat strapped in, and you can say, I must discuss with my team as well. What are the simple things that we're not paying attention to, that if we don't get right, we're not going to leave here with 10 fingers and 10 toes. So cut that as now the performance. You're now back as David, okay? You're no longer the safety audience with 10 fingers and toes. Hopefully you're David with 10 fingers and toes. Right. But here's the point now. That event happened a couple of months ago. I realized it was really funny when I saw my daughter coming over to us after coming into the parking lot. She's breaking her sides laughing. And I'm thinking, Conor, I can use this sometime. So I was just driving back actually with Maggie back to her home at that stage. I'm thinking safety, being aware of your surroundings. So now what I've done is I've used that a couple of times in conferences. It's not incredibly funny, but it is humorous. Every time I mention it, it puts a good smile on people's face. And what it does do is it reinforces the messages that I'm getting across. I didn't create the humor. I capture the humor. And that's what you can do and everyone else can do as well. And it's a basic little concept that I work on, that if you do that consistently over a period of time, you'll have a few different anecdotes or quips that you'll be able to pull out of that drawer sometime and say, hey, I can use this to reinforce my message.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other takeaway there is if you want to make a good joke, you've got to be willing to risk looking a bit silly, right? Is it?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I do talk about this in the concept. I've got a concept called, well, I'll ask you a question. If I say, I'm looking for a 5-letter word now here, David, all right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I say something funny, what is it that I hope that you will do?
Well, laugh, I assume.
Yeah, okay, all right. As I go, L-A-F-F. Oh, no, L-A-U-G-H, okay? All right. And what I say, David, is that in the program I'm doing on adding humor to your presentation, I've got this LAUGH acronym, 5 concepts that if you start paying attention to will help you to add humor to your presentation and to your sales pitch, and when you're trying to connect with an audience and get them on your side. So we can spend a little bit of time working through the LAUGH acronym if you wish. But the first and most basic one is L is for listen. So if you say something funny, listen to it. If you hear something funny, listen to it and capture it. That's basically what I'm talking about there. It's whatever makes you smile, listen to it. If you're reading it, as I say, listen. If you see it, listen. If you hear it, listen, but capture it. And when you do that, you'll have a repository of information at some stage that will allow you to dig into, that will help you to add humor to your speech, presentation, sales pitch.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely like to hear the rest of that in a moment. I think the other thought I'd offer, and it made sense to me, all of what you've said so far, but I think in terms of like giving presentations, and, I think we've all seen, there's this big craze, isn't there, with online webinars and virtual events and all of that. And most of us probably go to half a dozen of those a month at least, probably more these days. And most of them will disappear and we won't remember them. And we won't necessarily have picked out that learning. And the ones that stick in your mind, it's exactly as you say. It's the ones with a bit of humour. They made you laugh. They made you smile. They did something a bit different, something memorable. And I do think that humour aspect has a lot to, well, it takes a lot of credit, I think, for the things that are memorable in that kind of context as well. So, yeah, I totally see the value of what you're doing. And yes, please do tell us the rest of the acronym. I'd love to hear it.
Right. Okay. So we're talking about the LAUGH acronym. And basically what I'm saying here is reinforce you don't have to be funny to be funny. And we're not talking about comedy here. Comedy is different. I mean, comedy is making people laugh just for the sake of making people laugh. What I'm talking about is when you add humor is to reinforce your message and to make sure that the audience kind of remembers what your message is. So the LAUGH acronym is, the first element of the LAUGH acronym is listen, as we've referenced. Now, the second element of the LAUGH acronym is telling stories. So the way I presented this actually is if you can, if you've got some good antidotes to tell to people, sorry, what? It's not antidotes. It's anecdotes. Oh, right. Okay. That's right. Yeah. So if you've got good anecdotes to tell to people, and what I actually say is the antidote to a weak speech, David, is a good anecdote. All right. So what I'm kind of doing there is just, that's one simple little thing. I'm kind of mixing up words there that sometimes get mixed up that give it an additional little bit of humor. But basically though, if over the last, let's say 2 weeks, when you laughed, I'm sure you laughed quite a bit. I've seen some of your videos as well, you on YouTube, etc. So you're kind of a good affable guy. What do you think you laughed? What do you think caused the most laughter? Was it jokes that you heard, or was it stories or quips or comments that you got from people? What do you think caused the most laughter for you?
In terms of the videos you've seen, it was probably the latter. Generally in my life, it's probably about half and half, to be honest. But
right, yeah, okay. That would be what a lot of people would say, that it's maybe a bit of both. But what I do feel though is that the vast majority of time that people laugh at the coffee shop, at the pub, or in the workplace is not because of jokes. It's because of anecdotes, quips, comments, etc. that are made. And the funniest anecdotes, this is where we get into so we've got the listen, A is for anecdotes, U is for uncomfortable. And the funniest anecdotes are the ones where something went wrong and you now can laugh at them. So the incident there with Maggie when we were in the back seat of the car, that was marginally uncomfortable. It wasn't, but something did go slightly wrong, and we're now able to laugh at it. And what I say to people is that the stories that you heard down at the Starbucks or at the pub that made you laugh were not stories where everything went perfectly. There were stories where something went wrong, and we're now able to laugh at it. So if you can recall some incident that you tell your friends where something went wrong, you get their reaction to them, etc., ask yourself, hey, is there some way I can take that story and create a message around it? So then what you can do when you're doing a presentation is that you can tell the concept or your message and then reinforce it with the story. And what's particularly appropriate and useful about this is that if you're telling something where something went wrong for me, when I'm telling that story, I'm it's self-deprecating a little bit. I'm the guy who comes across as being not necessarily the idiot-like, but maybe a little bit human. And all those things are going to help you to connect better with your audience as well. Because all of the experiences that I have had, or all of the emotions that I have had, you've had those emotions in your life as well, David, generated by different experiences. But we've all had the same emotions, same reactions to various things. So if you can show that you're human, provide anecdotes where something went slightly wrong, but now isn't a big deal, it's going to create humor. And if you can use those to reinforce your messages, then you're well on the way to additionally improving the connection with your audience.
In the leadership and management context, and it comes up quite a lot on the podcast, is when we're talking about failure and how to best handle that.
Yeah.
And obviously, a lot of the way you deal with that, or positively, healthily, is that a word? Healthily? The healthy way? Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Is kind of reframe that and don't look at it as failure, look at it as a lesson. But I think actually as well on top of that, being able to look at it with a bit of humour, there's that old cliche, isn't there? If you don't laugh, you'll cry.
Right, yeah.
That makes sense for a reason. And then something else that's popped into my mind as you were finishing there was weather. We started the episode talking about the weather and we did a bit in the pre-show as well, and our various where we are right now. And I've often kind of said, well, the weather's a universal language because everyone has it. I might throw that away actually and change it to humour, because humour really is, especially in the way you've just explained it, it's about personal connections, isn't it? It's about common ground. It could be the universal language, couldn't it?
It could be, and it probably is the universal language. The challenge you've got is you've got to make sure that the language you're speaking is one that actually does relate to the audience. And so you've got to be careful when you're dealing with different audiences that the message does resonate with that audience. I mean, if I speak to a group of East Coast sales conference, for instance, I can say, I don't use any profanity or edgy stuff at all, but I mean, I can say certain things to them that I wouldn't necessarily say down to an audience down in Arkansas of a Midwestern evangelical audience kind of thing. And yet, so it's just a matter of making sure that what you say is appropriate for your audience. And that goes back to understanding your audience and empathizing with them and with their situation and with their mindset.
Absolutely, yeah, which is, of course, really important for leadership. So, there's always those little foibles and understanding the context and the individuals and all of that. So, yeah, very important caveat, though. Thank you for adding that.
Right, yeah. And, you bring up an interesting point there. One of the ways where you can really get humor is that if your culture or your background is different to your audience, you can play quite a bit on your background. So, as you can gather, I've been working on this fake Irish accent now for quite some time. But
it's very good.
It's very good, isn't it? Yeah. There is certain phrases we use in Ireland that are normal, but they actually generate kind of a great reaction here. So I know you're familiar with this, but I love saying to my American audiences something like, I've just come back from Ireland, and I have to tell you that Ireland has got the best crack in the world. Okay? And, of course, that crack means fun and having a good time. That's what we say about in Ireland and in the UK. The Americans kind of go, what did he say? So I play to that and I say, did he say crack? he doesn't look like a crack dealer kind of thing. And I then explain that crack is the Irish word for having good time, good fun, etc. But that kind of gets good reaction from the audience. So this, one of the areas where you can definitely find humor is in your heritage or in your family as well, and tell stories that, again, reinforce the messaging that you have got. So what I actually do is, I mean, I kind of expand on it a little bit sometimes here. So I'm talking to an audience of, say, 300 people. I'd say when we're doing this program now here today, I leave you with some good takeaways to leave you with a smile in the face, a spring in the step, and good actionable takeaways. And we'll also have some great crack while we're doing it. You kind of get, oh, and I explain the word crack, but then I use lines like, I mean, if you go to Ireland, you're quite likely to hear someone say, you won't believe the amount of crack we had down with the cop station at the cop station last night, kind of thing. So you just expand the references to your heritage a little bit and get them going.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know it was this sort of meeting. Oh,
that's right.
Amazing.
And in terms then of connecting with the audience, I'd say a regular, this is fact, you can say this to your Irish friend, how's the crack is the greeting, okay? Mm-hmm. And the answer in my circle is mighty, when it's good kind of thing. So I said to my audience as I explained this to them, so then I shout out, how's the crack? And the audience comes back with, mighty! How's the crack? Mighty! And then, and halfway through this conference, if I'm doing the good messaging again, if I've reinforced it with something, and if they have laughed at the little piece of humor I've given them, I might then shout out again, how's the crack? And they come back with mighty again. So it's, and that's part of, I think, connecting well with your audience. You've got to try and get them to get involved, and not just intellectually and just taking notes, but is there some way you can get them involved to do a shout out or a call out or ask them questions, get responses back from them, because that helps them to stay connected as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, particularly if you're in that kind of context where you're delivering training or you're trying to get to a learning outcome, I think that participation, that involvement is so important, because yeah, there's not many people who can just sit and listen to words verbally and just learn and that's it. And they don't need to do anything else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, there's a rare few, but I think most people, you've got to do something beyond that if it's going to stick.
Yeah. And the thing with the keynote speaking and with the training as well, David, is that most of the time, your audience is not the same audience that you had last week, the week before, and the week before. So if you're a presenter and you've got 5 or 10 humorous little quips, anecdotes, slides, etc., and you know they get reasonably good reaction, then you've got that material for each presentation, and you're providing the same content and the same humor that you provided last week, but you've got a different audience. They're going to smile at that. And when you've got them smiling or laughing once or twice, they're going to smile or laugh easier the next time. You're going to stay better connected with them. Their energy level stays higher. It's win-win for everyone.
The last thought I'll offer is perhaps you need to come up with a new acronym. Maybe CRACK should be your acronym, right? I'll leave that with you, though. You know, I'm not going to ask you to come up with it on the spot. But
well, I tell you what. I mean, this is a goofball one. I've only done this once or twice with smaller groups that I know. But I regularly tell people that if you want to be successful, you've got to in business, you've got to have a confidence, respect, attitude, and performance. Now, what's the acronym for confidence, respect, attitude, and performance? We're going to have a crap time, my people.
Some jobs, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
But you've got the first 3 letters there already, haven't you? So,
that's right, yeah. But quite seriously, though, I really do believe in the power of acronyms. If you, as a presenter, are providing a number of different points to your audience, all right, you may have PowerPoints, which drive me crazy. You may be giving them handouts, which are important, all right. But what else can you give them to help them to remember what you said? And I really do believe in the power of acronyms. So it's not going to be difficult for anyone to remember the word laugh in connection with adding humor to your presentation. If they can remember the word laugh, they'll be able to say, all right, Elvis, what was that? Yeah, it was listen. A is for anecdotes, and I know he said something about being uncomfortable, so that's pretty okay. And the G then, if we can go to this as part of the LAUGH acronym, is Google, or Google and the Bing, as I like to say. And the idea here, David, is that if you're doing a presentation and you're looking for, let's say you're doing a presentation on leadership, where you're talking about culture or leading with integrity as well, just Google on the Bing or on the AI at this stage if you want to, and look for humorous leadership quotes. Okay? Funny leadership comments. What did Groucho Marx say about leadership? Or what did Oscar Wilde say about leadership? Maybe nothing, probably. But if you go onto the Googler and do searches for your topic and the word funny, quote, humorous, those kind of things, you're likely to come up with some kind of a quote that will help you to reinforce your message. So you give your serious message about the importance of teamwork in the workplace environment. Maybe then you can find some quote that you've found online, and you can say, and as Oscar Wilde said, or as Groucho Marx said, reinforces the message. You give that quote, and then you kind of repeat the core message that you sent. So there's no reason why anyone here on this call cannot do that. And if they do that, they will be able to find something to help them to add humor to their presentation. So you've got to listen, anecdotes, uncomfortable, G is Google, and the final element of the LAUGH acronym that will help you to add humor to your presentation is he to ho ho ho. And the basic idea here is, I see you're laughing already at this, but the basic idea here is that, and I have used this quite a lot. When I'm doing presentations though, David, I have a very good idea when people are going to laugh. And what I do is I let them laugh, which is really important. But there are times that when I come up with a quip or a comment, or someone will make a quip or a comment and I respond back to it, and the audience goes, he. And because I'm not ready, I'm not aware it's going to cause laughter, I might sometimes actually stamp on it, which isn't a good thing to do. But what I will remember though is I remember, hey, I made that comment. It got a kind of a he from the audience. So I'll take it away with me and I'll say, all right, how can I go from he to ho ho ho? And as you become more aware of humor, you'll realize that, all right, if I used a different word there, I probably would have got a better reaction. Or if I took out a word, I'll get a better reaction. Or if another way to look at it would be, don't ever tell anyone you're going to tell them a funny story. Tell the story. And you hopefully get good laughter from that. But if you kind of broadcast or give a forecast that you're going to tell something funny, they're waiting for the laughter. It may or may not work. Hopefully it will. But you're much better off just making your serious point, humorous anecdote or quip, serious point again. And that is a way to help you to go from he to ho ho ho. So the LAUGH acronym: listen, anecdote, uncomfortable, Google on the Bing, and he to ho ho ho.
I like it. Yeah. Easy to remember as well, hopefully. Yeah.
Dead right. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, hopefully, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I like the expectation management there as well. It's like, if you're expecting a laugh, it's easy to be disappointed, isn't it? And it's better when you're caught unawares, I find. But
yeah. And that's one thing I regularly do see with people who don't appreciate humor. They say, I want to tell you a funny story now. Alarm bells as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, you're just setting yourself up to fall, aren't you, I think, in that
way. Yeah.
So leadership and humour then. I mean, most people, a lot of people see like leadership, the management role as something where you've got to be very serious all the time and you need to be taken seriously as well. And you can't possibly make fun of yourself or anything like that. So, I mean, do you think that's the right way of looking at it? And if not, what role do you see for having the sense of humour and applying it in the right way in leadership positions?
What I would say is, as a leader, you do need to be taken seriously, but I think you should not take yourself too seriously. Okay, it was the way I would put it. So if you're a leader and you're taken seriously by your team, they'll see you've got a vision, you're helping people to collaborate, and there's teamwork, etc., and you're respected. And when you ways that can make that happen, including appreciating your team, giving them compliments when they deserve it, etc., take them to task when fairly when that needs to be done. But if you've actually complimented them from time to time, you can easily take them to task then as well. That's a strong belief of mine. And within that, you're a human being. Your teams are human beings. Human beings like to laugh. So if you can bring appropriate humor or smile to people at your meetings or otherwise, it can make a real difference. And here's something I often recommend to clients. So when you and I were back in corporate, let's say we had weekly sales or marketing meetings, and the same 7 people are inside in that committee room every single week. And if you're on an executive team, you got the CEO up at the top, etc. You got a finance person sitting there on his right hand side, who's been in the same chair for the last 17 years, because the finance people don't really change. The marketing person is only there for 3 months, because the marketing person is going to get fired again in another 6 months' time, kind of thing. But I mean, basically, it's the same number of people who are around the table. If you've got a regular meeting, I think one of the best ways to start it off seriously now is start the meeting with a joke. All right. And the basic idea is you can do this when you're with a group of people that you're comfortable with and you're meeting all of the time. All right. The idea, gang, is that we want to be productive here. One of the ways to get productive is to get the mind going and to get the brain kind of active. A simple way to do that is to add a little bit of humor. So on the agenda for a regularly marketing meeting, manufacturing, sales, whatever it is. All right. David, you're on next week to tell us a stupid joke. All right. And all you got to do is you got to go to the Googler, find a stupid joke about X, Y, Z kind of thing, and tell it at your meeting. The idea is the more groans you get from your colleagues, and they say, David, that is so bad. That was worse than Joanne's joke last week kind of thing. Not profane or anything, but what it does do, it changes the vibe. And it gets the meeting off to a start. I really do believe, I've recommended to quite a number of clients, I would say 75% of them don't do it. Because I'm not sure we should do that, Conor, kind of thing. But the other 25% have done, I've got some really good responses from people for doing it. It's a simple thing when you've got regular meetings. How do we just change it up a little bit to get more energy and vitality into the room?
Yeah, make it a bit more human as well. Because I think, especially that type of meeting where it's the same people in the same room every week for hours on end. And you've only got to do that for 2 or 3 weeks before nobody in the room really wants to be doing it anymore. So, yeah, I mean, anything exactly as you say is break up with that monotony. Yeah, it's an interesting one, actually, that not many people would do it. It surprises me, but also it doesn't surprise me.
Well, that's the thing, you see, and but humor does help people to connect. It creates a better vibe in the place. When you laugh, you're feeling better. You can get your colleagues laughing, they're feeling better as well. It's not a comedy show we're talking about here. It's humor for a purpose.
Definitely, that's it. And it's exactly that purpose, isn't it? Is building connection. And obviously, the longer you work with someone, the better it gets, because you start to learn each other's sense of humor. And yeah, I mean, people who say, leaders should never be getting involved in that sort of thing or joining in the joke or anything like that. Yes, leaders need to be taken seriously. I agree with you. But at the same time, that doesn't mean they've got to take themselves too seriously. And it's the two of that, I think.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
And ultimately, if you want to build connection with people, you need to show them you're human. And
absolutely.
Who doesn't have a sense of humor? Robots. So.
Yeah, or AI.
Well, yeah. Although some of them can tell jokes if you ask. So
they're not very good, though, I gotta say.
That's true, but it's progress.
Yeah.
No, anyway, so yeah, I think we more or less agree on the role of humour in leadership. So good, I'm pleased. So on the subject of starting with a joke, if you had asked me in that situation, my go-to terrible joke, I'm going to tell you, and you're going to judge me for it, I know, and I'm okay with that. Right. But it's, what did the fish say when he swam into the wall?
What did the fish say when it swam into the wall?
Damn.
Very good, very good. It's not bad.
It's not good.
Bad.
It's not good. It's terrible.
Yeah,
I can't take credit for it. I stole it,
right.
but still. It's...
But that's the point, though. Something like that will get a nice reaction from the meeting that you're in, etc. It's not in any way offensive. It's very, very simple, and it gets a good reaction. And if you can get someone else doing it next week, it's going to help to build the camaraderie and the collaboration and the productivity at that meeting.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes when you're the leader in the room, you've just got to be the first one to take the plunge and start that process going and not be afraid to tell the terrible joke. And
yeah. That's really important, isn't it? Because I do appreciate that this works when the leader is prepared to do it. When the leader is not prepared to do it, and there's a lot of leaders who are not prepared to do it, it doesn't work. So I think that something that leaders maybe don't pay enough attention to, David. I think in that the way they walk the talk determines the whole environment. Or do they walk the talk? And the leader sets the mood in an organization. So if you're in a large company, if you've got a hard-hitting, no prisoners leadership, that's going to filter down, and people are going to get more afraid, in my opinion. There's going to be less honesty coming up, etc. But if you've got a leader who is open and aware of and empathizes with the people and their situation without leaving them get away with things, I think you're going to have a much more open and collaborative environment. Yeah,
I would agree with that. I mean, there's so many things that could apply to in that phrase. If the leader doesn't do it, it's not going to work. Yeah. I mean, it's setting that right example, and I think it's about more than just inspiring personal behaviour. It's about setting the tone. It's the culture of that whole organisation. And if you're afraid, or you don't think it's the right thing to do, you don't want to show that sense of humour, you don't want to be seen as telling jokes, or for whatever the reason, you got to think about the message that sends to the rest of the team.
Yeah, most definitely. And you've been in corporate, I've been in corporate. I mean, it's quite amazing the difference in culture from one department to another. All right, we've got our own corporate values, and we all say we're an open environment, etc. When we listen to our people, that's the corporate value that appears on the website. And then you go into the manufacturing team, and there's a good level of collaboration there. And then you go into the sales team, and everyone is kind of knife stabbing each other, etc. So I mean, it's wonderful to have all these corporate values, but trying to actually drive them down through the organization. Actually, driving them down is the wrong word to use there. Have them embraced by the organization is a real challenge, and so much of it depends on the individual leaders in the various functions and departments.
Absolutely, it does. I think I did laugh when you used the salespeople example there, because I mean, part of that, I think, sales teams are always going to be kind of their own beast to an extent, because it is a deliberately competitive field, isn't it? And that's a lot of the time that's how they're incentivized. But I do agree with you. It will come down to the department head, the leader of that team.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the top leadership of that organization, if they are sitting back and allowing those silos of different approaches to develop, and they're not keeping each of those individual leaders on target, keeping those wider values in mind and actually living them, I do feel like the responsibility sits at the top with that one.
I mean, one of the I've addressed this once or twice with some senior executives, and when I hear the senior execs say, "I've got an open door policy," and we like to have an open culture, etc., I ask them the question. No, I've got to be careful how I phrase this, but it's once I've kind of got their trust, etc., I ask them the question, "Well, how often are people actually coming in your door?" And then I ask the question, how often are you going out the door, the open door, to go onto the floor or to speak with people who are two levels below you, kind of thing? Or is it only your executive team that you have the open door with? So again, it's about words are easy, but talking is easy. Actually taking action is what ultimately determines the environment and the culture that you are creating.
Absolutely. And that is a great example, because it's so easy to just say, I've got an open door policy. But if you really care about what people have to say and what they think, you will go and ask them. You won't just sit back and put your feet up and wait for them to come to you, because they probably never will. I mean, it's a very rare person, I think, particularly in that really strict sort of hierarchical kind of organization, who is going to jump a few steps up and go through that open door, knowing that their line manager is watching them as they do it.
And that was one of the things that really kind of intrigued me when I came over here first. Now, the organization I was working with, we were Best Foods at the time, Hellman's Mayonnaise, North Soups and Sauce, etc. And my boss at the time was an Italian American. And he kind of made Robert De Niro sound like a choir boy, okay? Really good New York stuff. So as an Irishman, I was able to relate pretty well to him. But he was incredibly affable, and he got on well with everyone in the organization. And in a lot of I was marketing VP, and a lot of the calls I made to the larger organizations, I was astonished at, one, the size of the offices that some of the executives had, the kind of difficulty in actually getting to the executive's office kind of thing. The ordinary soldier was never going to get near the executive. There was so much physical barriers between senior execs and the team. There was the cultural barriers as well. And I find that it's not as bad as it was here in the US, but I was intrigued initially about the barriers to communication that were in a lot of the larger organizations that we used to visit.
I'm of two minds about it, because, I mean, there's so many of those barriers that are like artificially created deliberately. And it becomes all about status and title, and everyone forgets words like leadership and empathy and people and all of that. But at the same time, like, an open office environment is just as bad for different reasons, because everyone can hear. And it's really difficult to have a private conversation when you need to sometimes. And also really difficult to concentrate when you need to get something done. And you've just got this general noise everywhere all the time. And
I
think it should be everyone should have an office or nobody should. But then that doesn't work either, because if nobody does, it's back to open. Go back.
I mean, there is a halfway house. You've got to be able to allow for private communications and personal communications as well. You got to make sure you create that kind of an environment also. But I was intrigued. The US auto industry, I kind of just like reading about it. But General Motors, who are now doing reasonably well. But I mean, when they were going through troubles 10 to 15 years ago, I was reading about them. The executives used to have their own private parking lot. They would have their own private elevators, etc., and they go up to the top floor. Now, tell me how they're going to have any idea what Joe Blow wants to buy a Ford F-150. These are GMs I'm talking about, all right? Or wants to buy a GM Volt or something like that, really thinks. What they're doing is they're being fed rubbish from up, go further up, and it's being filtered left, right, and center. It's not easy being a CEO, but I think one of the challenges you've got to address is, how can I make sure that I'm getting real information rather than information that smells nice kind of thing.
Yeah, and again, I mean, it is a very big challenge. And again, I'm of two minds about it, because, I mean, the simplest thing is you remove those artificial barriers.
Yeah.
Which could take a number of forms, but ultimately you've got to go out and talk to people.
Yeah.
Whether they're people in your own organization or customers or potential customers even. But even then, because of even if it's only a perceived one, but that power differential, the authority difference, the status difference means that you might not necessarily get the honest truth or the full truth if you go out and ask those questions. So for me, I think it comes back to what we've been talking about really from the start, which is that culture and the way that you're perceived and the way you interact with people and the role of humour and how seriously you take yourself and whether you empathise and whether you're the sort of person who says you've got an open door versus actually goes through the door yourself.
Yeah.
Goes to talk to others.
Yeah.
And I think it's not something where you can just fix it by doing one thing. I think it's a consistent pattern of behaviour over time, and people will learn to trust you more. And once they trust you more, they'll be more open with you.
Yeah. And I think it brings us to one of the key elements of a good leader as well is listening skills and paying attention. Because or I hear what they're saying and I'm listening to it, but their body language kind of isn't actually reflecting what they're saying. They're maybe being a bit more careful in the way they're phrasing something, or the words they're using don't necessarily reinforce what I think they're saying. So a lot of it is, I think, not just providing good content from yourself as a leader, but you've got to be able to listen and I go back to the word again, empathize and appreciate what your team are going through and what they need from you and what they're actually saying to you as well.
Yeah. I mean, I like to think of it as it's hearing versus listening. I think hearing is kind of like, I heard them making noises. I heard them stop making noises, so that means it's my turn to speak now, so I'll talk now.
Right.
Yes, listening, which is you heard what they said, you understood it, you've maybe detected there's a subtext there, so you're going to ask an intelligent question and try and get to the bottom of whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
And that difference is massive. And so many managers get that wrong.
Yeah.
CEOs as well. Like everyone in any leadership role. The number of times I've been on the wrong side of that kind of conversation as well.
Yeah. And one of the most useful questions I think for a leader at any level is, I really do believe in the power of complimenting people and finding reasons to make people feel good, because I talk about, I've got a different concept on the spells CHAP, CHAPS, 5 micro goals to building teamwork. But the first one, C, is about compliment, because if I set myself a goal, I want to compliment someone today. When I compliment you, David, I know I've achieved my goal. The dopamine kicks in for me because I've achieved a goal, but it's obviously going to make you feel better as well. And I often get questions from people like, how do I find ways to compliment people? And what I actually say in my presentation is, look, you can always find some reason to compliment someone. You can come up with something like, wow, your hair doesn't look as bad today as it did yesterday. I mean, all right, something like that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I watched it this morning. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. But I mean, I actually do use that line. But that's kind of an example where we're talking about the importance of compliment, but I'm bringing the humor in as well. But go back to the serious question: how do I create those compliments? And a really powerful question for a leader, which will allow them to find reasons to compliment your team, is, what did we do well yesterday? Or if it's at those weekly meetings, we've started off with a joke, all right, that we were talking about. The next question on the agenda is, what did we do well in the last week? Okay. Now, because most of these meetings are all about problems, complaints, etc. But if we can start off with making people smile, if we can start off with finding reasons to compliment Joe in the IT department for solving that security issue that we had, etc. Kudos to you, Joe. Well done, etc. But it'll happen if you ask the question, what did we do well? No, you don't have to go searching for a reason to compliment someone. And I say this when I'm speaking to food service teams, where and most restaurants, they might have a morning huddle where they get together for 3 or 4 minutes kind of thing. I do think the first question you should ask is, what did we do well yesterday? And they might say, Jeremy was able to solve the problem we had on table 11, etc. And he really helped me when I was having a bit of difficulty. Kudos to you, Jeremy, etc. And what will happen, David, is that if you ask that question, provide a compliment, tomorrow when you ask that question, someone's going to come up with something different, and they'll find it easier to be able to highlight what we did well. So we're now highlighting the good points. And now I can talk about the challenges that we had yesterday as well. Okay. And it's not just start off by saying, gang, we made a complete mess yesterday. That'll happen from time to time, obviously, but don't be highlighting that at your daily meetings or weekly meetings initially.
Yeah, I like that idea, because you're right. It is very easy to spiral into that negativity, especially when you're not enjoying the meeting to start with. It's very easy to get into that mindset of, this is rubbish. Why am I doing it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a reset, isn't it? And I think also what I really like about that is, if you're the CEO asking that to a room of your senior management, it's not just about the people in the room then, is it? It's about what did people outside the room who maybe don't get noticed so much by the people in the room, because it forces those leaders to think about, actually, well, what have our people done really well this week?
Yeah.
I should go and compliment them after this meeting, actually.
Yeah.
And again, it all kind of trickles down in the right ways, doesn't it?
Right, yeah. And when you go out that door and you compliment the people, you're going to get more appreciation as a leader. You're probably going to get better effort, etc. And as I say, like when you come home to your spouse and you compliment your spouse now based on what you've heard from the Irishman, the spouse's reaction is going to be, "What did you do wrong?"
What have you done? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. But I'm blessed. I'm married to a darling Irish girl for many, many years, so she knows my mad, goofy sense of humor at times at this stage. So yeah,
good. Pleased to hear it. Yeah. So we heard my bad joke earlier. I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, what is your favourite joke?
Right. I tell you what I'll do here. I'll show you the way I actually finish up my presentations. Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So, all right, gang, you now understand the importance of adding humor to your presentation, or you understand as a leader the importance of complimenting your team, etc. But this won't happen just because you want it to happen. You've got to be deliberate in trying to make it happen and do something. I'll tell you an old story. It's about Patrick, who was a good living Irishman. And Patrick ran into some financial difficulties due to gambling, womanizing, and drinking. So the Irish definition, David, of good living is pretty broad, okay? All right. Patrick's granddad dies, and Patrick goes out to the granddad's house and starts cleaning out the house. And then he goes out to the garage. I'm going to ask you a question now in a second, David. He goes out to the garage. He's tidying up the garage, and then he brushes against a lamp. And out of the lamp pops a...
genie?
Yay! All right. Very good. But it was actually a leprechaun.
Oh,
okay?
No. That's close.
Hey, it's the Irishman here, okay?
Yeah, fair enough. Right. Yeah.
So the leprechaun says, Patrick, I'll give you one wish. And Patrick is a bit taken aback, and he said, I thought you gave 3 wishes. And the leprechaun says, no, Patrick, it's kind of post-COVID. We still have supply chain problems, etc. So you're only getting 1 wish. All right? So Patrick says, okay, leprechaun, if you let me win the lottery, I'll pay off all of my debts. I'll give the rest away to charity. Leprechaun says, I like it. I'll let you win the lottery. 1 week goes by. There's no lottery win. 2 weeks go by. Patrick doesn't win the lottery. And after week 3, Patrick goes back out to the garage again. He brushes against the lamp, and out of the lamp pops the...
leprechaun.
Leprechaun. Hey, see, you're a learning audience there. All right. Okay. So the leprechaun says, what can I do for you now, Patrick? And Patrick says, leprechaun, you told me to win the lottery, and I didn't. And the leprechaun says, Patrick, give me some help here. At least buy a lottery ticket. Okay? Right. That's an old story, but it is a story with a message. And the message is, just because you want to add humor to your presentation doesn't mean it's going to happen. Just because you want to be a better leader and create a more collaborative team does not mean it is going to happen. You've got to effectively decide what the metaphorical lottery ticket is, take action to do it, and when you do it, you're going to then be well on the way to achieving your goal. It doesn't happen just because of what you want it to happen. So, cut there. So that basically is an example of a kind of an old story that I heard years ago. A lot of the audience have heard of it. They haven't heard about the leprechaun version. I threw in the supply chain, which gets really good reaction since COVID, etc. But it does help to reinforce the message that I have been talking to them about. So that's an example of a silly joke. And that's actually one thing I do suggest, David, sometimes. If you do hear a good joke, ask yourself, hey, is there some way that I could actually adapt that, customize it to my audience, and use it to reinforce one of my messages? And I think you can do that. I've got a few other examples that I've done that over the years as well. So when you're speaking to your audience, do your darndest to make sure you customize your presentation. And when you do that, you're going to be well on the way to connecting better with them as well.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's a good joke. It's a good story. It reminds me of the one about the guy who's trapped on the roof of his house in the flood. Have you heard this one? And he prays to God, and God save me. And a boat comes along opposite him, and he says, no, I'm waiting. God will save me, and so on and so on. And then ultimately he dies and drowns in the flood. And he gets to the pearly gates and he said, well, what happened? I was waiting for you to save me. And God says, well, I sent you the man in the boat, the helicopter, and it lists off all these things that he turned away. And it's a very similar message, isn't it? It's like, yes, you can trust in other things, but you've also got to take action yourself. Move yourself towards your goals as well.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
I love it.
With that one, I mean, I've heard that obviously quite a few times as well, like you have. There's no problem, I think, with you actually using that particular story again for speaking to a group. You might actually say, you may already have heard this story that I'm going to tell you now, but it's got a really powerful message and I want you to think about it. So when you're starting to tell the story about you're on the roof and the helicopter comes by, and you see some of the people maybe nodding their heads saying, I already know. I said, all right, you know this. Think about what the implications of the story are, etc. And then you go on to give the next one or two examples. So when I preface that story about Patrick and the leprechaun, I do start off by saying, this is an old story. You may have heard of, something about it, but it's a story with a powerful message, and I'm asking you to pay attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is a great story, and it does have a powerful message. So there we go.
Yeah.
If you could go back in time, how far back in your life would you go, and what would you say to your younger self?
You told me you've been asking that question, and I think I would just say that everything would be okay. But probably as a 17-year-old, I probably wouldn't have believed it. I mean, I didn't have a bad childhood, but it was every other 17-year-old, I was going through the pangs of unrequited love. Oh, and things like that.
But we all,
absolutely, yeah. So that would probably be it. Believe in yourself. Everything will be okay. What I also know, really do believe, David, is that I try to make the most of the good times. Now, I'm lucky; I've got a good mindset, but I do work on my attitude as well. And yesterday I was playing bad golf, okay? But I was saying to myself, Conor, you're so lucky. You've got friends who are not above ground anymore. You've got friends who can't really play golf. I've got a brother who has had to give up playing golf because of health problems, etc. And I said, just appreciate what you've got. And I do that, I think literally every single day. I say to myself, you are lucky. Just appreciate what you've got. Because I know that sometime in the next couple of weeks or months, I'm going to have a bad time, or God forbid something goes wrong. But that would help me to say, all right, Conor, tomorrow, you can be in a better situation again. And I do think appreciating the good times is a really helpful way to help you to get over the bad times.
The power of gratitude is too easily underestimated, isn't it? And it's a variation on the theme, isn't it, of what you're saying earlier about complimenting people. It's just kind of self-focused instead of outward.
Yeah, I mean, we all absolutely need significant levels of reinforcement because we're getting knocked down left, right, and center, either by life, by other people, etc. So that's why, as a leader, you need to try and reinforce the people. But when you're experiencing good things, good experiences, etc., pay attention to them and appreciate them in the moment. It'll really help you, is my honest belief.
Yeah, I think I share that belief. Yeah. It definitely makes a difference. It's, again, it's one of these little habits, isn't it? That you have to just keep practicing and be consistent at, and ultimately it will deliver a return for you one way or the other, I think. Yeah,
because I think I haven't really used the word much or at all in this, but I do believe in the power of intentionality. Be intentional in what you're doing. Be intentional in writing those notes to capture the humor that is around you. Be intentional when you're going into work that I'm going to compliment one person today. And if you can start being intentional in a few different areas, I think you're going to make progress as a person, as a leader, as a spouse, family member, whatever it is.
Leadership Heroes.
Last question. This one's my favourite, which is why I always save it till last. So it's called Leadership Heroes. If you had to pick one person, I now have to limit it to one because too many people pick 2 or 3 or 5 because they can't choose just one. It could be anyone you like, though. They could be alive or dead, past or present, real or even fictitious, if you prefer. But this person should be someone who, in your opinion, perfectly embodies leadership. So who would that person be and why?
The person I would pick is Congressman John Lewis. I'm not sure if he's that well known in the UK, but he passed away a few years ago. He was a congressman out of Georgia, and he was one of the main drivers of the civil rights movement in the 1960s and the 70s, etc. He wrote a wonderful book called Walking with the Wind. And the bravery of these people was just absolutely phenomenal, David. I mean, the civil rights organizers, they used to actually have meetings or training meetings beforehand where then to just figure out what they were going to do when they were going to get attacked by the cops and gassed and hit with the batons, etc. They were given instructions as to how to be able to get into a huddle and defend yourself so well. And then they would go out and they'd walk the streets of Alabama and other places, knowing they're going to get the crap beaten out of them. And Lewis was a guy who was one of the real leaders there. And I mean, he wasn't a leadership, he wasn't an orator in the scale of Martin Luther King, etc. But my God, the bravery of the man and all of the people that were with him, it's mind-boggling to me. So he's the guy that I really kind of doff my hat to and say, he was talking about getting into good trouble, I think was the phrase he used. And sometimes getting into good trouble is a way to drive the world forward.
Yeah, I'm vaguely familiar with him. I've definitely heard of him. He's not been chosen for this question before, so bonus points. Well done.
Right. Okay.
Martin Luther King's chosen quite regularly, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. That kind of goes to your point a bit, doesn't it? Because obviously the one who's famous and well known for giving the speeches and the public persona, whereas actually a lot of the times behind the scenes there are people like Congressman Lewis, who is kind of being the quiet leader, the quietly competent, the quietly confident, the working things in the background, being influential through different means and all of that. And quite often I think, the well-known, the public-facing leaders would not succeed without the other kind of leaders behind them and around them. So, yeah, really like that choice and great explanation for why as well. Thank you very much.
Right. Yeah. No, he was some guy. And, on the contrarian side, this might surprise people, someone I tell people not to follow as a leader is Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was a genius, absolutely. But it's only a genius with his mindset would have been able to do what he did. His management of people, I think, was generally awful. He wasn't a particularly likable guy. No, you don't have to be likable to be a good leader, in fairness. But I worry when I hear people say, I'd like to be like Steve Jobs, or he's my leadership hero. He can be your marketing hero, your commercial hero, but being a leadership model, I really have reservations about that.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. I think, if you're looking for the kind of leader who sets a vision for a product and what they want the company to do and that kind of the big strategy stuff, yeah, okay. I mean, pretty good example there, and it's hard to argue with the results.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you hear some of the stories about the way he would treat people, and anyone who questioned like the vision or said, well, even just like day-to-day questions and the way you'd fly off the handle and all of it. I mean, I don't know how much of it is true, obviously, it's all anecdotes, but yeah, it does make you wonder. But then on the other hand, again, like there's that quite famous one, I think it was like an Apple company conference or something. And one of the dev team asks him a really difficult question about the technology and, what do you even know about it? And his answer to that, I think, actually is a masterclass in explaining the role of a CEO and executive leadership and how you don't actually know I know nothing about it, but I don't have to because that's not my role. Yeah. And he handled that actually with quite a lot of class, I thought, presumably because he knew he was being filmed. But right. Still.
And he knew he was going to fire the executive a minute after.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that guy lost his job by the end of the week. I'm sure. Yeah. Interesting though. Interesting one. Yeah, it's good that you raised that one because he's been picked a couple of times actually, I think.
Yeah.
And I always feel a bit sort of ambivalent about that.
Yeah. I mean, the man is an absolute genius, and I wish I had kept my Apple stock that I did buy in 1997.
Oh, no!
But anyway.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Spilt milk and all that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Conor, it's been a true pleasure. I will ask you one little more question. It's not a real question. If anyone wants to learn more about you, perhaps see you speak or get in touch to work with you or anything like that, where can they go to learn more?
Right. As I indicated previously, the brand, David, is Irishmanspeaks. So the website, guess what it is? It's Irishmanspeaks.com. The YouTube channel is Irishmanspeaks. And I'm all over the social media as well, with Instagram and LinkedIn and the Twitter, as I call it. And there's basically Irishman Speaks as well. You'll be able to find me there. All one word, Irishman Speaks. But it's been an absolute pleasure, David. Really enjoyed the conversation. Really good. And what I liked about it, was a conversation. It wasn't an interview, and good conversations is what people, I think, when you get the best content from people.
I hope so, yeah. And it's more fun for me as well, if I'm honest. So thank you again, Conor. It's been great meeting you, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you, David. Take care. Cheers.
Conor, thank you again so much. What a great conversation. I loved that. I had a great time, and you certainly got me laughing along with you many times, as anyone who's watching the video will have seen. Listener, if you would like to learn more about Conor and what he does, and perhaps get in touch with him, posted links to his various social accounts in the show notes, as well as a link to his website as well. So as always, I say it nearly every week, I do encourage you, reach out, learn more about him, get in touch if you feel like he might be a good fit for you or an event that you're hosting, or you want him to speak, or you want to go on one of his training courses. And we've had some really important and powerful leadership lessons today. If you would like more of those, if you'd like early access to the podcast, for example, if you'd like to be able to attend some of the regular sessions I run for my members, for my listeners even, then do come and join us. Sign up to the Integrity Leaders online community for new leaders, first-time company founders, and learner managers. You can join by visiting www.leadernotaboss.com and clicking on the green button. And I have a permanently open promotion for any listener of the podcast. If you use the discount code, which you will find also in the show notes, drop me a message if it's not there. It should be there. So use that discount code and you get 50% off your membership every month for as long as you remain a member. So you can't say fairer than that. Hope to see you there really soon. And I'm pretty much out of time. Thank you for being with us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as Conor and I enjoyed recording it. I hope you'll be back again next week when I'll be talking to my next guest. Until next week, remember, take the work seriously, but not necessarily yourself. Do whatever you can to find ways to inject or show your sense of humour at work, and especially with the people that you lead. And be a leader, not a boss.